I wasn't looking for anything that day. The county archive basement was just another part of my shift, endless rows of old filing cabinets. Metal shelves sagging under the weight of forgotten records. The air down there was always cold, damp, heavy, with the smell of paper that hadn't been touched in decades. I was moving boxes, clearing out a space that no one had stepped into for years. That's when I noticed something wedged behind the last row of cabinets. A cardboard box, water-stained and buckled, tucked away where no one would think to look. It didn't belong. When I dragged it out, flakes of damp cardboard stuck to my hands. The lid sagged open and the smell hit me immediately. Mildew, yes, but beneath it, something sharper. Burned hair, inside. The box was full of folders, all stamped with the Silent Hill town seal. Yellowed, brittle, some edges blackened as if singed. There were no barcodes, no catalog numbers. Nothing to show they had ever been logged into the system. The handwriting scrawled across the tabs was hurried, uneven. And again, one phrase appeared. Project Resurrection. The reports inside detailed disappearances. Families, workers, drifters. All between 1978 and 1983, each page ended abruptly. No conclusion, no follow-up, no closure. Just fragments. When I mentioned it to my supervisor, he barely looked at the folders. His voice was flat when he said, "Old junk, burn it," but I couldn't. Even after I closed the lid and pushed it aside, I felt uneasy, as though the weight of the papers had shifted on their own. And when I left the basement that night, I had this strange sensation that I wasn't the one who had discovered the box. It had discovered me. Asterisk, I told myself I wouldn't go back. But a week later, when my shift ended and the others had gone home, I found myself walking back down the basement stairs. The archive at night was different. The overhead lights buzzed faintly, casting long shadows across the concrete. Every sound seemed to echo longer than it should, the shuffle of my shoes. The creak of the door closing behind me. The box was still there, sitting in the same spot waiting. This time, when I opened it, I found something new. A bundle of envelopes tied together with a faded string. All were addressed to residents of Silent Hill. Different names, different streets. None of them had postal stamps. None were ever sent. The paper felt damp, almost soft in my hands, like it had been left in the rain and dried again. I slid one letter open. The handwriting inside was shaky, jagged. It read like a warning. Don't stay out at night. The RISNT clean? They watch when the fog thickens. Another was scrawled in block letters, leave before the bells. I opened one more. But instead of words, there was only a gray smear across the page. It clung to my fingers, sticky, leaving a faint tingling sensation on my skin. I dropped the letters back into the box. That's when the buzzing lights above me cut out. The basement fell into silence so heavy it pressed against my ears. I stood frozen, every hair on my arms raised. Then, in that stillness, one of the envelopes slipped free from the bundle on its own and drifted to the floor at my feet. I didn't pick it up. Asterisk. I couldn't stop thinking about the letters. The shaky handwriting. The warnings. The way one envelope had slipped from the bundle like it wanted my attention. I tried to convince myself it was gravity, that I'd stacked them wrong. But the image of that envelope falling on its own replayed in my head every night when I closed my eyes. By the third night, I gave up on sleep and started researching. Silent Hill, a town swallowed by fog. Closed off after a coal fire or a landslide, depending on which version of the story you read. Half the articles contradicted each other. Some mentioned evacuation orders. Others said no one had lived there for years. A few forum posts claimed the government had erased it entirely, that even aerial maps blurred when you tried to zoom in. The strange part? No official state database even listed the town anymore. It was as if Silent Hill had been deleted, written out of existence. Still, I couldn't ignore what I'd seen in those files. And when I traced one of the addresses from the undelivered letters on an old map, it lined up exactly with a road that supposedly no longer existed. That was enough. I told myself I'd just drive out there, take a look. Prove it was nothing more than abandoned land. Closure, that's all I wanted. The drive started normal enough. Empty highway stretching out under a pale sky. It's a kind of sky that looks like it's holding back rain but never follows through. I had my window cracked, the air cool, carrying the smell of damp leaves from the forest pressing close on both sides. I checked my GPS more times than I needed to. Each time, the blue dot lagged, jittering as though it wasn't sure where I was. Cell reception dipped, bars blinking in and out. My podcasts stuttered, then fell silent. At some point, I stopped seeing other cars. The road narrowed, cracked at the edges. Grass pushed through the asphalt in places. When I slowed at a curve, I saw a weathered sign half hidden in weeds. Road closed. No, through access. I almost turned around. I should have. But there were no barricades, no cones, no real effort to stop anyone. Just that one crooked sign leaning like it was too tired to stand, so I kept going. The forest grew denser, trees crowding closer until their branches arched overhead, making a tunnel of shifting shadows. The further I drove, the quieter it got. I realized after a while I hadn't heard birdsong in miles. No insects tapping against the windshield, just the hum of my engine and the low hiss of tires against cracked pavement. Then the fog appeared. At first it was only a wisp, curling low across the road like smoke from a distant fire. I expected it to thin out as I drove, but instead it thickened, folding in around the car until the trees vanished into a pale wall. My headlights caught only shapes, trunks, limbs, shadows that seemed to twitch and bend as I passed. The air changed too. The cool freshness of leaves and soil gave way to something sharp, metallic. It reminded me of the smell. You get after cutting your hand, iron-heavy and sour. I rolled the window up, but it didn't help. The smell clung to the inside of the car, thick in the back of my throat. I checked my phone again. No service. The screen froze, map stuck on a single point. For a moment, I thought I saw headlights in the fog ahead. Just a faint glow, as if another car was coming my way. Relief hit me. I wasn't alone out here. But when I slowed, waiting for it to pass, nothing emerged. The glow faded, swallowed by gray, until I was staring at empty road again. I told myself it had to be a reflection. Moisture in the air, bending the light from my own beams. But deep down, I didn't believe that. The longer I drove, the more it felt like the road was stretching itself, extending with each turn, keeping me inside. I didn't see mile markers or mailboxes or any sign of property. Just the same cracked pavement and the same suffocating fog. My chest tightened. I tried to focus on the steering wheel beneath my hands, the texture of the worn leather, something real to ground me. But the silence pressed harder with every passing minute. I found myself turning the radio dial just to break it, cycling through static, desperate for any human voice. Nothing. At some point, the silence began to play tricks. I could swear I heard footsteps crunching in the gravel off the side of the road. I caught myself glancing at the rearview mirror over and over, convinced I'd see someone walking behind the car. But there was only fog stretching back forever. I tapped the brakes, heart hammering, and for a second I thought about parking, catching my breath, maybe even turning around. But when I looked in the mirror again, the fog behind me looked thicker, heavier, almost solid, turning. Back wasn't an option anymore. The road carried me forward, deeper into silence, and then, through the fog, I saw it. The sign. Weather-beaten, letters nearly stripped by time. Welcome to Silent Hill. I don't know how long I'd been driving when the town finally appeared. It didn't arrive the way towns normally do, gradually, with signs, streetlights, gas stations. Silent Hill just unfolded out of the fog, like I had crossed an invisible border without realizing it. One moment, the road stretched endlessly forward. The next, the outline of buildings leaned out of the gray. The streets were cracked, uneven, grass bursting through the gaps. The sidewalks tilted in places, crumbling at the edges. Street signs hung crooked. Most letters faded beyond recognition. I slowed the car to a crawl, scanning both sides. waiting for any sign of life, but the town was empty. The only movement came from the fog itself. Coiling and stretching across intersections, buildings loomed in silhouettes, two-story homes, stores with boarded-up fronts, a gas station whose pumps had rusted down to skeletal shapes. Everything carried the same abandoned look, paint peeled into curling flakes, windows clouded with dirt and grime. I turned down a residential street. Houses lined both sides, leaning on one another like tired old men. Some roofs had caved in. Some doors were chained shut. Most windows were dark, curtains drawn tight. But one house was different. Halfway down the block, I saw it, a narrow, two-story home with warped siding and a broken porch. Every door and window was sealed tight with chains or boards except for one. Upstairs, the curtain of a single window billowed gently outward. The glass stood wide open, swaying in the fog as though someone had been leaning out just moments ago. I stopped the car without thinking. My eyes stayed locked on that open window, my breath quickening. There was no sound, no movement, nothing but that fabric shifting in and out. But it felt wrong. It felt watched. Against all logic, I climbed out of the car. The air hit me immediately, damp, sour, heavy with mold, and the faint trace of something sweeter underneath. Like fruit left too long in a bowl, rotting in its own skin. The fog muffled every step I took, turning the sound of my shoes against cracked pavement into faint, swallowed echoes. The closer I got, the stronger the smell became. Would rot, wet plaster, mildew? My throat tightened against it. I climbed the porch, the boards flexing under my weight. The door was chained shut, so I pushed around to the side, where a window had already been broken. Jagged glass still clinging to the frame, I hesitated, flashlight in hand, before climbing through. The moment I landed inside, the air was different. Thicker. It clung to my lungs. Damp and close. The living room stretched out around me, wallpaper bubbled and peeling. The pattern, a faded floral, had lifted in great blisters, revealing another layer beneath. That layer was striped, faded to yellow, and where it peeled, I saw still another beneath it. Layer after layer, each from a different decade. Trapping time against the walls. The floor sagged beneath a carpet that squelched with dampness. My flashlight beam swept across a toppled lamp, a broken coffee table, a collapsed armchair eaten through by mold. Everything smelled of rot. But under it all was that same faint sweetness. Sickly, clinging. I climbed the stairs, each step groaning, the wood soft underfoot. My heart pounded louder with every creak. As if announcing me to whatever waited above, the hallway was narrow, lined with closed doors. The wallpaper here was darker, bubbled with damp, curling at the seams. I kept the flashlight ahead, but in the fog of dust, my breath came out ragged and white at the end of the hall. As the open window waited, I stepped into the room. It was empty, completely bare. No bed, no dresser, no scraps of furniture. Just a rectangle of space, its wood floor warped, its walls stained dark in uneven patches. The curtains swayed gently, the air moving unnaturally cool against my face. I walked toward the window, the fog outside pressing thick against the frame. I leaned closer, scanning the street below. My car sat alone in the mist exactly where I'd left it. Nothing moved. Then I saw it on the glass, a single handprint smeared into the condensation, large, human, still wet. My breath caught. My flashlight trembled in my hand as I stepped back. No one had been in the room when I entered. I was sure of it. The house had been silent except for my own movements, and yet the print glistened, droplets still sliding slowly down the glass as if the hand had just pulled away. I turned, shining my light across the walls, the corners, the ceiling. Nothing. Just warped wood, peeling paint, and that heavy, choking smell. The curtain shifted again, brushing my arm as it blew outward. Cold air rushed past me, carrying that faint sweetness stronger now, as if it clung to the wind itself. I didn't stay. I hurried back down the stairs. Each step a groan beneath my weight, every shadow shifting in the corners of my eyes. The living room seemed darker than before, the walls crowding closer. I clambered out the broken window, scraping my hand on the jagged glass, and stumbled back onto the porch. The fog outside swallowed the street whole. My car seemed farther away now, its shape blurred at the edges. I jogged toward it, resisting the urge to look back at the house. But just before I reached the car, I did. And there, in the upstairs window, the curtain no longer swayed. It hung still, motionless, yet faintly, pressed against the glass, was the shape of a hand. Not smeared, not dripping, pressed flat, watching. When I left the house with the open window, I told myself I was done. I told myself I'd seen enough, that the box in the basement, the letters, the road, the fog, the handprint, all of it was a coincidence stitched together by my own imagination. If I got back in the car and drove until the fog thinned, maybe I could still convince myself none of it mattered, but Silent Hill has a way of pulling you deeper, even when you think you're leaving. I don't know how long I drove. Time blurred inside that fog. Every street looked the same, cracked pavement, leaning streetlights, buildings half lost in gray. My headlights cut only a few feet ahead before dissolving into pale nothing. Then, through the haze, I saw something different. A glow. Weak, flickering. I slowed, heart thumping, and as I rolled closer, the shape revealed itself. A payphone booth. Glass cracked, metal frame rusted, but still standing on the corner of a deserted intersection. And beside it, a man. He stood motionless, as if carved into the fog. His clothes were indistinct, the kind of neutral gray that blurred with the mist. His head was tilted slightly, like he was listening to something far away. For a long moment, I sat behind the wheel, watching him through the windshield. He didn't move, didn't acknowledge me. Just stood there, close enough that I could see the faint rise and fall of his chest. I opened the door and stepped out, gravel crunching beneath my shoes. The air was colder here, the fog damped against my skin. Each step toward the booth felt heavier than the last. "Hey," I called out, my voice swallowed almost immediately by the mist. "Are you? Do you live here?" No answer. I tried again, louder. "Do you need help?" Still nothing. He didn't even glance my way. His head stayed tilted, lips parted just slightly, like he was straining to hear something I couldn't. The payphone hummed faintly. A low electrical buzz that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. I glanced at it. No cables ran into the booth. Nothing connected it to power. And yet, the faint glow inside pulsed, steady and unnatural. I turned back to the man. My nerves prickled as I stepped closer. His skin was pale, almost blending into the fog, but his eyes weren't focused on me. They were fixed just past me. At some point far off in the gray, I took another step. Close enough now to hear the shallow rasp of his breathing. That's when his lips moved. A whisper. Barely audible. "Don't answer." I froze. My stomach dropped. "What?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Don't answer what?" His head turned slightly, the movement so slow it was almost mechanical. His gaze still didn't meet mine. His lips parted again, and this time the whisper was clearer, though it seemed to echo strangely in the fog. "Don't." "Answer." The payphone shrieked to life. The ring was sharp, metallic, cutting through the silence like a blade. Too loud, too sudden, rattling against the glass panels of the booth. I spun toward it, heart slamming in my chest. The phone on the hook vibrated, the cord swaying with the force of the sound. My pulse roared in my ears as I stared at it. Behind me, the man's whisper came again, louder now. Ragged with urgency? "Don't answer." I looked back and he was gone. The space beside the booth was empty. The fog untouched, as if no one had ever stood there at all. The phone kept ringing. Over and over. Each chime shattering the silence, each one louder than the last, until it felt like the sound was burrowing into my skull. I backed away, steps uneven, my eyes darting left and right. No shapes, no shadows, just fog swallowing the street hole. My hand trembled on the car door handle. I couldn't take my eyes off the phone. It rang 13 times, and then it stopped. Silence fell again, thick and absolute. I stood frozen, every nerve in my body screaming to run, to drive, to leave this place behind. But some part of me couldn't shake the thought. If I had answered, what would I have heard? I climbed back into the car, hands slick against the wheel. My heart beat uneven in my chest. As I pulled away, the glow of the booth faded into the fog, swallowed like it had never been there. But the echo of that ring followed me, long after the sound had gone. The further I drove, the less certain I was of where the road led. Street signs appeared and vanished in the fog like fading memories. Some I recognized from earlier: Wilson, King. Toluca, though I couldn't tell if I had circled back or if Silent Hill simply rearranged itself behind. The fog when I wasn't looking at some point. I stopped trying to navigate. I just drove until the car felt wrong under me, until the silence in the streets pressed too close. Then I pulled over. That was when I realized something had changed. The fog was no longer just thick. It was heavy. It clung to me in a way that made every breath feel like I was inhaling wet cotton. The air tasted of rust, of iron, sharp on the tongue. Even inside the car, the smell was unavoidable. I killed the engine, stepping out into that suffocating stillness. My shoes crunched against pavement scattered with pebbles and bits of broken glass. The sound was startlingly loud. Too loud. That was when I noticed it. When I stopped moving, the sound continued. Not immediately, but a fraction of a second later after my foot had already settled. A faint echo of my own step, like someone was just behind me, just slightly out of sync. I froze, the blood draining from my face. My eyes darted back, searching the fog. Nothing. No shadow, no figure. Just the endless gray. I tested it again. One step forward. Crunch. Half a heartbeat later, another crunch. I spun. Eyes wide, but the street behind me was barren. The fog swirled lazily, obscuring the edges of buildings that seemed to tilt inward. Pressing close. I tried again, this time walking faster. Step, crunch. Step, crunch. Always the same delay. Always the same distance. The echo wasn't random. It was deliberate. My heart hammered in my chest. Sweat prickled at the back of my neck despite the damp chill. I told myself it was just sound bouncing strangely in the fog, that the mist was distorting it, but the timing was too exact. To human, the silence between each step was unbearable. So I kept moving faster and faster, gravel scattering beneath my feet. Until my jog became a sprint, the echo sprinted too, always a half step behind. The sound grew louder the faster I ran, until I could swear it wasn't just behind me, it was beside me. At the edge of my vision, shapes shifted in the fog, tall and indistinct, as if figures walked parallel to me, always just beyond sight. I gasped for breath, chest burning, but I didn't dare stop. I could feel them there, pacing me, invisible companions matching my every move. The fog pressed closer, damp against my skin, filling my lungs with metallic air. Finally, I stumbled onto an intersection where a single street lamp flickered weakly above. Its circle of light barely pierced the mist, but it was enough to make me slow, to drag myself beneath it, like a drowning man clawing at the surface. I stopped in the glow, panting. Bent forward with hands on my knees, the echoes stopped too. The silence was worse. I straightened slowly, scanning the fog. The lamp buzzed faintly overhead, a thin lifeline in the smothering gray. My chest heaved. Every muscle tense. And then a sound. Not footsteps this time. Breathing slow, deep. Right behind me, I spun, heart lurching. But nothing was there. Nothing but fog shifting lazily. Curling around the edges of the light, the breathing stopped when I turned. I stood rooted to the spot, too afraid to move, too afraid to stay. My pulse thundered in my ears, each second stretching into eternity. Then, from the mist just outside the lamplight, a whisper, my name, soft, drawn out. You shouldn't be here. The voice was mine. The sound froze me to the marrow. It wasn't just similar, it was exact. My voice, my cadence, my tone. The way I sound when I'm afraid but trying to hide it. Who's there? I rasped, though my throat was dry, my words weak. No reply. The fog shifted, and for the briefest moment, I saw it a shape. Not fully formed, not solid, but me. My height, my frame, a pale impression of myself, standing in the mist, watching. I blinked, and it was gone. The lamp above me flickered violently, buzzing louder as if it too were afraid. I stepped backward instinctively, my heels scraping against gravel. The sound echoed again, but not half a beat later this time. Perfectly synchronized, it wasn't following anymore. It was matching. I broke. I ran harder than I ever had in my life. Abandoning the faint safety of the lamp, plunging into the suffocating fog. My lungs burned, tears stung my eyes, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. Every step, every scrape, every breath mirrored perfectly. The fog thickened until the world dissolved. My body moved on instinct, terror propelling me forward, until at last, a shape emerged through the haze. A building, small, squat, with boarded windows and a single door left ajar. The sign above it was faded, letters peeling, but I could still make out the word library. I staggered toward it, shoving the door open with trembling hands. The hinges groaned, wood scraping across warped floorboards as I forced my way inside. The air was stale, filled with the scent of mold and dust. My footsteps echoed in the emptiness, bouncing between tall shelves that leaned precariously. And this time, there was no delay, no second set of steps, just mine. I collapsed into a chair near the entrance, chest heaving, head spinning. My ears rang with the absence of sound, silence crushing me even more than the pursuit had. But deep inside, I knew it hadn't stopped. It was only waiting. The library was colder inside than it had any right to be. The air smelled of damp wood and mildew, layered with the faint temps of something metallic, like old coins left to rust. Dust motes drifted lazily in the weak shafts of light, leaking through cracks in the boarded windows. The silence was thick. Not peaceful, but watchful. I sat there in the chair by the entrance, every muscle in my body tense, waiting for the sound of footsteps to return. But the longer I listened, the more oppressive the stillness became. I finally forced myself to move, the scrape of the chair legs against warped floorboards making me wince. My own footsteps seemed unnatural, amplified by the emptiness of the building. I wandered deeper into the library, past shelves sagging with Moldeton books. Some had collapsed into heaps on the floor, their pages curled and stained. The further I went, the more wrong the building felt. The layout didn't make sense at first. The halls were narrow, just rows of shelves in tight corners. But then I turned one corner and found myself in a wide corridor lined with doors. Too wide for a library. To empty. The doors didn't have labels. Just plain wood, each with a tarnished knob. The corridor seemed longer than the building should allow. I stopped halfway down and glanced back toward the entrance, but the view was swallowed by fog creeping in through broken
windows.
I tried the first door. Locked. The second, too. I pressed my ear against the third, listening at first nothing. Then, faintly, like a radio tuned badly off station, sound. Static. It was faint, but steady. A soft hiss that seemed to come from beyond the door. I stepped back quickly, pulse hammering, as if whatever was making that sound might hear me. I kept moving down the corridor until I reached a door at the very end. Unlike the others, this one was slightly open, a crack of darkness visible in the gap. I shouldn't have gone in. I told myself that over and over. But in Silent Hill, curiosity always seems stronger than reason. I pushed the door open. The room was wrong. It wasn't. It's just that it didn't fit the library's architecture. It was that it didn't fit any architecture. The walls were bare concrete, slick with damp, streaked with black mold. A single light bulb hung from the ceiling by a frayed wire, swaying gently though there was no breeze. The bulb pulsed faintly. Not steady light, but an unsteady glow. It's like a dying heartbeat. And in the center of the room, A table. It was metal, bolted to the floor, the surface scarred with deep scratches. Beside it stood a single chair, also bolted down. The kind of setup you'd expect in an interrogation room or worse. The air was suffocating, thick with rot. I stepped inside, against every instinct, screaming for me to turn back. My shoes echoed against the concrete, each step magnified in the stark emptiness. That's when I saw it, another door, not against the wall, not where a door should be. It stood in the center of the far wall, but it wasn't attached properly. There was no frame, no hinges, just a door set into the concrete as if it had grown there. Its surface was darker than wood should be, the grain warped like stretched skin. I froze, staring at it, my breath shallow. The bulb above me flickered harder, buzzing, casting the warped door in uneven flashes of light and shadow. Without meaning to, I reached for the knob. It was cold, too cold. My fingers recoiled instinctively, but some part of me, the same part that had made me answer the letters, the same part that had followed the fog, pressed forward. I turned it. The door opened with a sound that didn't match the movement, not a creak, but a tearing like wet fabric ripping apart. Beyond it wasn't another room. It wasn't even darkness, it was nothing. Not black, not empty, but nothing. My eyes couldn't make sense of it, couldn't focus. The sight twisted my stomach, sent waves of nausea through me. It was absence, raw and infinite. And from that absence, something looked back, not with eyes, not in any way I could name, but I felt it. A weight pressing into me, invasive, cold. My chest tightened, breath stuttering, as if invisible hands were closing around my ribs. I stumbled back, slamming the door shut, the tearing sound echoing long after the movement stopped. The bulb above burst with a sharp pop, plunging the room into darkness. For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. My lungs refused to work, my body frozen. In that pitch black, I swore I could still see the outline of the door, glowing faintly, pulsing, then footsteps, not echoes, not delayed. Footsteps circling the room. I pressed myself against the cold wall, heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The steps were deliberate, slow, scraping against the concrete. They stopped directly in front of me. I held my breath. A whisper. So close, I felt it on my skin. You opened it. The words weren't mine. They weren't any ones I knew. They were layered, as if multiple voices spoke in unison, overlapping into a single broken sound. My knees buckled. I scrambled blindly toward the door I had entered through, clawing at the air until my fingers found the handle. I yanked it open and stumbled back into the corridor. The fog was thicker there now, pressing in through the cracks. The doors lining the hall were gone. In their place, only concrete walls stretched endlessly in both directions. Behind me, the wrong room door creaked open again. Though I hadn't touched it, I didn't look back. I ran. The corridor stretched and twisted. But I didn't stop until I burst out through the library's front entrance, stumbling into the damp night air. The fog welcomed me like a suffocating blanket, but even that was better than the emptiness of the room that wasn't supposed to exist. Still, as I stood there, gasping, trembling, I couldn't shake the sense that the door hadn't been just a room. It was a wound and something inside. Silent Hill had felt me tear it open. When I staggered out of the library, the fog was waiting. It curled around me like it knew I had no choice but to step into it. My lungs ached with every breath, my heart still hammering from the thing I'd let glimpse me through that impossible door. I wanted to leave. God, I wanted nothing more than to leave. But as I looked around, the streets no longer resembled anything I'd driven. They were narrower now, uneven, like the pavement had buckled and shifted in the mist. Every direction looked the same, endless gray. I walked anyway. I didn't even try the car. Somehow I knew it wouldn't be there. Silent Hill doesn't let you take the easy way out. The silence pressed in as I moved forward. No echo of footsteps this time. No whispers. Just the sound of my own breathing, too loud in the emptiness. I tried to convince myself that was good, that it meant I was alone again. But the truth was worse. It felt like the town itself was holding its breath. The streets narrowed further, buildings leaning at impossible angles. Some looked like houses, others like schools. Their facades warped and sagging, boards nailed across windows that no longer fit square. And yet, even without people, I could feel eyes. The unmistakable sensation of being watched from behind every crack, every slit in the fog. At one corner I stopped. There was something on the pavement. Trail.Hants. Small, at first, a child's size. Smeared into the concrete as if wet with some dark liquid that hadn't dried. They led down a narrow alley that vanished into thicker fog. Every instinct screamed at me to turn away, but my legs betrayed me. I followed. The air in the alley was even colder. Heavy with the smell of mold and iron, the walls on either side dripped with condensation. Rough brick slick beneath my fingertips when I brushed against it to steady myself. The prints continued deeper, growing larger, more distorted. A child's hands giving way to something else. Fingers lengthening, palms spreading, until they no longer resembled hands at all, but claws dragging against the ground. I should have turned back. But I didn't. At the end of the alley was a door. Rusted, warped, its paint peeling in long strips, no handle. Just a rectangle of rotted wood with a faint line of light bleeding out from the cracks. The handprints ended at its base. I stood there, for what felt like forever, trembling, listening. From the other side came a sound, faint, rhythmic, breathing. Not human. Wet, guttural, as if lungs were full of mud. I stepped back, heart in my throat, but the door shuttered before I could move farther. Just once, a sharp jolt, like something testing it from the other side. Then again, harder. The wood cracked, dust raining down from the frame. I ran. I didn't care where. I just turned and sprinted back into the fog, the pounding of my footsteps echoing in every direction. The alley spat me out onto another street, this one lined with cars long abandoned. Their doors hung open, their seats black with mold. Every windshield was shattered. I ducked between them, trying to put distance between me and that door. My lungs burned, my throat raw, and then I heard it. The footsteps. Not behind me this time, ahead. I froze, crouched between two rusted-out cars. The sound was steady, slow, deliberate. Each step crunching against broken glass. Through the fog, a figure emerged. At first I thought it was the man from the payphone. But no, this was different. It was me. Not the pale flicker I'd glimpsed before, but solid. Flesh skin, my height, my face, my expression. Everything down to the smallest detail. It walked toward me with the same uneven gait I had from exhaustion, the same rasp of breath. The same dirt smeared into my jacket sleeve. I backed away, horror clawing at my chest. It mirrored me perfectly. When I stumbled, it stumbled. When I gasped, it gasped. But its eyes were wrong. Too wide. Too dark hollow. It stopped just a few feet from where I crouched. For a moment we stood locked in place, mirror images caught in a nightmare reflection. Then it whispered, not with my voice. Not even human. You opened it. The same layered voice from the room that dashed WASN, single quotes too. Dash there. My knees gave out. I scrambled backward on hands and knees, the broken glass slicing into my palms. The thing didn't follow. It just stood there, watching, until the fog swallowed it again. I don't know how long I ran after that. Minutes, hours, days. Time lost all meaning in that endless gray. My legs carried me without direction, guided only by fear. Eventually, I found myself back where I started. The payphone booth, it glowed faintly in the fog, exactly as before. The glass cracked, the cord swaying gently, and this time, the phone was already ringing. Sharp, metallic, relentless. I stumbled closer, unable to stop myself, though my body screamed to turn and flee. Each ring vibrated in my skull. It's louder and louder until it drowned out thought. I reached for the receiver with a shaking hand. I didn't want to answer. I remembered the whisper, "Don't answer," but my fingers closed around it anyway. The ringing stopped the moment I lifted it. Silence then. Faintly through the crackle of static, my own voice, breathing, waiting. "Hello?" And then a sound behind me. Footsteps perfectly in sync with mine.